Coupe-styled SUVs are all the rage at the minute, purely because they claim to be an uncompromised vehicle. Boot space? Yeah, loads of that. Coupe looks? Yeah, no problem. Off-road capability? Of course. But what about sportiness? You see, BMW claim that even this 2-litre X420 diesel is a hoot to drive on a B-road. I think we'll see about that. Let's get into it. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, whilst older SUV coupes just look weird to me, manufacturers are starting to get pretty good at designing these things, and this X4 is no exception. The front still looks a tad off, I think, but the rear, well, it just looks good really. Powering this thing is the same 2-litre diesel that's used in many other BMWs. It's a great engine, but with 190 horsepower and 400 Nm of torque, will it be enough to get this X4 a respectable time on our 30 to 70 leaderboard? Let's find out. Yeah, see, whilst this engine is great for the 4 Series, the extra 220 kilos that this X4 brings along just slows things down a tad too much for my liking. It's fast enough for daily use, but at this price point, it needs to be in the 7s really. To think a 1.3 litre GLA 200 would breeze past you is just a tad embarrassing really. Thankfully, the interior does make up for some of that shortcoming. Big comfy seats, low slung driving position, and an infotainment system that is close to being the best on the market make this an absolutely cracking car to spend a long period of time in. In terms of optional extras, you've got a heads-up display, Harman Kardon sound system, panoramic roof, and the very underrated extended storage option. Having that little cubbyhole is actually super useful. Now the rear, this is where early coupe-styled SUVs struggled. That sloping roofline really does eat into headspace, but thankfully BMW have thought about that and made this little cutout that allows anyone over 6'2" and under to get pretty comfy. In terms of legroom, it's the same as the X3 of course, so pretty good really. Spec-wise, you get your own climate control and some nifty cup holders that actually stay out the way until you need to use them. Plenty of manufacturers could learn from that one. One other thing that you don't often see in sporty SUVs is rear windows that go all the way down. Yet this X4 has somehow managed it. It means A, you can let even more light in, and B, you get somewhere else to rest your elbow. Move to the boot and you'll find only 25 less litres than the equivalent X3 with the seats up. So for daily use, it's still a very practical car really. The only issue you might come across is trying to fit big square items in like washing machines and fridges when you have the seats down. Right, let's go for a drive and see if BMW are telling porkies about the way this thing handles. Now I have actually reviewed an X4 before, but that was the M-Lite version, the X4 M40i. If you want to go watch that, I'll put a link up in the top right hand corner for you there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this regular 20D X-Drive compares. Going over speed bumps kind of feels the same actually. We are riding on the M Sport suspension because we've got the M Sport package. So it does feel, well, typical BMW really. Quite stiff, but there's a comfort edge there. Steering is wonderful. It has really positive turn-in, which means it basically wants to turn into a corner. And it weights up nicely. All the pedals are weighted really well. Throttle pedal is well damped. Brake is absolutely perfect. It's soft, but there's plenty of travel, so it feels like you can stop when you want to. The thing is, the steering wheel is a tad too thick for me, as is it for most people. But it's kind of nice at the same time. I don't quite know how to describe it. It's substantial. In terms of parking, the X4 is actually pretty good. So we have parking sensors and a reverse camera on this car. And then there's lines telling you where you're going to go. And although the steering rack is quite fast, it does have a lot of opposite lock, so it means you can get into a parking space pretty easily. This is quite a tight one as well, and this car isn't exactly small. As you can see, parking sensors are accurate, and the parking sensors are on the side of the car as well, because this car has the Parking Assist Plus system, which I think it can park into a bay for you if you want it to. But that's only for parallel parking, not bay parking. It's a very smooth car to drive around town though. ZF 8-speed gearbox does a really good job of just blending the gears together. And you get that 400 Newton meters of torque from just 1750 RPM, which is good. If I give it half throttle out of here, it's pretty smooth really. For a 4-cylinder diesel, it's a smooth engine. Right, let's reset the trip computer to see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. I think from memory it's supposed to do 47, although if I'm wrong I'll put the correct figure up there. And it should be able to do that. BMWs are usually pretty reliable with their figures when it comes to their diesel cars. Before we get on the motorway, we're going to have a taste of the handling. So I put the car into sports mode, no sports plus in this, but you can still put the traction into sports, so it's basically the same thing. Then I put the gearbox into sports as well, so that gives us quicker shifts and it'll hold on to gears for a little bit longer. It also makes the steering comically heavy, but there is a good amount of feel, especially for an SUV. Let's see what it's like. Too much traffic, unfortunately. The good thing about this X-Drive system is it's still rear biased. So you get that lovely pushing feeling coming out of corners. We will do some more driving later, but first, let's get on the motorway and see what this thing's like. Okay, we're on the motorway, so what's this X4 like? Well, initially, you notice that it's fairly quiet in here. There's not a lot of road noise, and almost no wind noise at all. Even though we've got the M Sport wing mirrors as well, they usually generate a bit of wind noise, but so far so good. Visibility is not so good though. There are pretty thick A-pillars and B-pillars, and the view out the back is really not that good. I think that's because of the coupe body shape. It's livable, but it could certainly be better. Then in terms of seat comfort, you can get the seats really low. They actually go lower than I would like. Usually I have to completely bottom the seat out to get comfortable in the car, but I've still got plenty of adjustment to be had. You can adjust the pitch of the base, pitch of the back of course, and then you've got that extendable bit for your thigh as well. But it's the suspension and steering that really shine here. The steering's nice and light, but it's so predictable at the same time. And the suspension, whilst it's stiff, it really settles down around town. You can just whack the cruise control on and absolutely chill out. I'm sitting in Eco Pro now, and the response is still fairly good actually. I find VAG cars like Audis, VWs and Seats to be pretty sluggish in Eco. They tend to pretty much get rid of all the turbo power until you hit about 3,500 RPM. Whereas this, you give it a little bit of throttle and it seems to get a move on. Gearbox could be a little bit quicker though. Then in terms of interior quality, BMW are doing really well at the minute actually. Of course you've got soft touch materials pretty much everywhere in the cabin, but everything's put together really well as well. There's nothing in here that you prod at that makes creaking noises. I'd say it's actually a bit above a Mercedes at the minute. Then in terms of wear and tear, this car's 4 years old now, and the only real wear and tear is on the steering wheel. The seats are still fine. You've got a couple of creases on the bolsters, but that's expected of any car. And yeah, that's pretty much it really. The steering wheel is the only thing. Although, having said that, it is missing a little bit of paint, so they could probably do better on that front. I have noticed a lot of BMW steering wheels, they seem to lose their finish quite quickly. Moving on to cost options, what would I get if I only had 3 choices? Well, the first thing is going to be that Harman Kardon sound system. A, it gives you a nice metal grille here with the Harman Kardon logo, and B, it really lifts the sound quality. The standard system is fine if you're not really into music, but if you are into music, definitely spend the extra bit of money on this system. It's got good bass, good mids, good highs, and not only that, when you do turn it up, it maintains its clarity. That's one thing I really like in a good sound system. A lot of sound systems, especially in cars like Range Rovers, unless you go for the tippy top spec car, will get really loud but end up being really mushy, so it's kind of pointless having the volume if you don't have the clarity at the same time. Next thing is going to be the ProNav screen. It's definitely something worth having. It gives you a lot more real estate, and it just looks a lot nicer as well, actually. There's just a lot less screen bezel around the corners than there is with the standard screen. And then the last thing is going to be the upgraded full digital dash for the BMW. So this system works fine, and it gives you all the information you need, but you can tell they've kind of done a half-assed job at it to make you spend more money, and for me it would work. I would like the full digital cluster, purely because this system is it just looks weird to me. Like, it's fine, but in a car this expensive, having half digital dials just looks weird. That's our little motorway journey over. So how did we do? Well, we're sitting at 46 mpg so far, which is pretty close to the quoted figure, really. I think on a long journey you would defo get above 50, as long as you're driving fairly conservatively, of course. Anything above 70 you're going to be getting less than that. Anyway, let's get on a B road, because even though this is an SUV, it's a BMW, so it should still be fun. Right, back in full attack in manual. I've got the seat bolsters tightened. This is where the X4 really comes alive. Still got that BMW feeling. I've put it in manual as well because I want to see just how quickly this gearbox responds. And it's not bad, actually. It's not quite as good as the M-Lite 40i. But once you learn its rhythm, it's fairly good. The thing that stands out for me though is just the steering. It just oozes feel. And it means you've just got so much confidence in taking it around corners quickly. That combined with fairly stiff suspension and a rear bias drive setup means you get a really pleasant feeling coming out of corners. The only thing is it won't go sideways. It does have that safety understeer built in. If it was very slippery it might, but it just has a really balanced chassis. Right, let's see what this X4 is like down a B road. SUVs tend to feel pretty intimidating down tighter roads like this, purely because they're just bigger. But BMW do an amazing job of getting the car to wrap itself around you. And you can place it exactly where you want it on the road. So it actually means it's safer to drive, even if you are going quickly. You wouldn't find it too hard to keep up with the hot hatch down here, really. Especially if it was wet. That X-Drive system does a great job of just dealing with the power. Or torque, should I say. It's a fantastic handling car for what is, frankly, a regular X4. The funny thing is, it actually kind of reminds me of that Focus ST we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. It actually has a very similar feeling when you turn it into a corner. The only difference is the ST is obviously a lot sharper once you are in a corner, and it does have a tendency to lift off oversteer, whereas this doesn't. It kind of just settles down into the corner and stays there. Okay, it's not a drifting machine, but honestly, that's just because it lacks a bit of oomph. The chassis, steering and suspension though, I mean, wow, it's seriously impressive. Everything feels cohesive and in turn brings confidence to the driving experience. It's a fairly stiff ride for an SUV, but BMW certainly weren't lying when they said it was sporty. Even this little 2-litre diesel is a great drive. As always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like and why not subscribe, as not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which of course includes this BMW. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.